What's up, everyone? I'm so glad that you're joining me this week. I'm your host, Ryan McCarty. We talk about everything people, culture, engagement. So this week, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to Champion Your Culture. Yo, what's going on, George? Good to see you here this week.
Yes, man. It's
Yeah,
good to be back. The week of Thanksgiving. Hey, I want to start off this show by saying I am thankful for you, and I'm thankful
Thanks,
for
brother.
everybody that is watching us live, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're watching or listening to the show. We want to thank you for joining in. Champion Your Culture, sponsored by Culture of Good, and I'm thankful for Culture of Good, the team there as well.
Yeah, they got, Culture Good. We've got a lot of cool things coming up. We now offer all of our training virtually. Got that coming up January 24th and 25th for those of you that jump on with us every week and you learn about how to champion people. This is a training that centers on how to engage all your stakeholders within one streamlined process. So we're engaging employees, customers, and community through the Culture of Good. And so if that's of interest to you, let us know, reach out to us, message us. We'll get you hooked up with a link to reserve your seat. They're limited. Also, George, we're doing something brand new for Culture of Good. We're coaching. So we have executive leadership coaching one-on-one that happens bi-weekly. So twice a month, we jump on. We've got a process and a plan to follow over 6 months. And that's really all about personal, professional development. We all know that we have room to grow. And sometimes we can get stuck. Sometimes we can get in a whirlwind, or maybe we're just going through transition and need an extra ear, an expert, someone to come alongside us to coach us through and give us expert advice, right? So anyway, that's what's going on at Culture of Good. I'm just so excited because, you know, people jump on and we learn together and we grow together and we have a community. But I also want people to know that Culture of Good does have services and products that we offer to your company, to your team, to you as an individual to help you really champion your life and also champion your team. So, yo.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. So I'm excited. I know that we're ending the year and I don't want to skip anything. I love Thanksgiving. It's one of my favorite holidays. And, you know, Christmas is around the corner. And so there's a lot of things that are exciting that are coming up, but I am really fired up, Ryan. We spend a lot of time together anyway. I always bug Ryan, whether it's text messages, emails, or calls, wherever I can get a hold of him. I might just pop up at his house. But I'm excited about 2023 and everything that's coming about. There's a lot of things that we got planned for those a part of our network. And so a lot of exciting things, as you said. I'm excited about the coaching and really helping develop leaders and really championing their purpose, championing their culture, championing their leadership, really, and what that looks like. It really ties into, not to jump too far ahead, but leadership really ties into, and the coaching really ties into accountability, which is our topic for today. And, I was thinking about this, Ryan, when we were talking about, we do a little bit pre-planning for our meeting, for our podcast. And when you talked about accountability, I was thinking, man, this is kind of a bad time to talk about accountability.
Why is that?
We're going to Thanksgiving, bro. We don't want to be accountable for the calories about to eat. We're trying to stuff our plates, our stomachs, all the weight we've lost. It's all for this moment.
And, but what if we're accountable to eating a lot?
There you go.
Like if one of our values is to really enjoy the holiday, right? I mean, if one of our values is like shared experiences, then, actually eating and enjoying it might actually be something that is accountable. So I agree with you, though. It's easier to set goals than to stay accountable to them. Right. And I love what you said about Thanksgiving and gratefulness and leadership, because so many times I ask leaders, I challenge them, how grateful are you for the people that are on your team?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember when I first started out in ministry, full-time pastoring, I had a mentor pastor tell me if it wasn't for people, leadership would be great.
Oh man, how that goes, right? How that
Yeah,
goes.
yeah, right.
Yep.
Well, their leadership didn't last as long as I think they assumed it was going to, because
Yeah.
really that's what it's all about, right? Like
Yep.
leadership is begins, I think, from a place that many people within the business realm in that world don't really recognize, and that is, in order to lead people well, you need to love them well, and you need
Yeah.
to be grateful for them, and really, when we think about accountability, I just need to show this real quick. I think these are chickens, but since it's close to Thanksgiving, I'm like, this might be turkeys. I put this on LinkedIn, so let's say I guess they're turkeys. They have a little gobble underneath.
Yeah, they got a little
One
flat back.
friend says, well, you've got a problem with avoiding personal accountability, and his friend says, yeah, and whose fault is that? you know it's one of those ideas, accountability, that can be used many times. If we define it wrong, it can be used in a very toxic way, right? Because we assume that if we micromanage people and if we have a heavy hand on people, we just simply say, well, I'm just keeping them accountable, right? So we're
Yeah.
talking about a culture of account. We're not talking about a culture of punishment.
Yeah.
We're talking about accountability. And actually, when we hear the word accountability, many, like you said, it does have a negative connotation. There's just no way
Yeah.
away from it, which is absolutely insane, because accountability is one of the most positive things that you can embed within the workplace. I mean, really, if we're talking about how to do business well and how to empower people well, which we do really well at Culture of Good, how do we champion people and lead people well? It's by fostering a culture of accountability, because accountability becomes an umbrella that holds a lot of things, right?
Right.
It
Right.
really does. Like it entails so much more than simply saying you have to do this, and if you don't do this, you'll get punished for it, and therefore we have a culture of accountability, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. 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 For me, accountability means it's really me being responsible for my behavior, right? My
Yeah,
actions. And sometimes it's not about the accountability of your actions, it's your reactions and things that you don't do internally, right? And so, how are we accountable to the things that we should do, but we don't do, and hold those things in? And so, when I think about accountability, I think about ownership. How am I taking ownership that is fully required and responsible at every single, from a business standpoint, in the business workplace, organizational level, right? How do I, hold that responsibility in all aspects that it needs to be,
yeah,
and
and
not
you're
share
talking
favoritism,
from an
right?
employee. You're
Yeah,
talking from like an employee standpoint, but what
yeah,
about the employer? The responsibility,
yeah.
because okay, if I am your manager, right? I'm leading George, and you're saying, as one of my team members, I need to have ownership of this. But what if I don't give you ownership, right?
Ooh,
So that's the idea too, is that you can't have a culture of accountability unless you foster it,
yeah,
unless you're actually giving people permission to take ownership. So I think about that, like exactly what you're saying. Like if you have a culture within your business where people are afraid to fail, that is not a culture of accountability, right? Because when you have a culture of accountability, people are going to be uh, at the very beginning more confident in putting themselves out there and trying new things. Why? Because they recognize that this isn't about getting everything right. It's about, when I try something and I fail, I take ownership of not only what I did well, but
yeah,
all the shit that fell apart, the things that didn't work out, the gaps that are still there. Taking ownership doesn't mean having like a program of recognition, and every time I perform well, I get recognized. That's not ownership. Ownership is when I don't perform well, I step up and say, that's on me, right? And
right,
that ownership of that, many times employees don't want to do that because there's a culture of fear, and distrust because there's not a culture of accountability. With a culture of accountability, there is trust. There is the belief that if I step out, I know someone else has my back because they're accountable to me as much as I'm accountable to them in this organization, you know?
Very, very true. Hey, we got a lot of people in the chat with us live. I want to just shout out a couple people. I appreciate everybody out there. We got our good friend Joe Wash over in Arizona.
Joe, what's going on, Joe?
We need to have Joe on. Joe, you need to join us.
Joe, what's going on? You got to jump on.
Andrea, Philippia, Kenneth is in the chat as well. And so we want to shout out everybody that's there. We know there's so many people out there chatting, just a few names that just popped up. So we appreciate everybody out there. As always, if you can like and share the stream, we love when people join in. And so the more, the better that can come in here. Ryan, when we talk about examples of workplace culture and what that means in forms of accountability, I as we talk about this, it's when I think about accountability, and I'll put myself in the employee standpoint, right? I'm putting myself back in a job in one of my best / worst case scenario situations, right? I'm gonna speak from experience.
Yeah.
Some of the things that really kill the accountability portion of our culture and what that really meant was everything was reactive. It was never proactive in the sense of aligning things up. Leaders didn't show up, right? Because of fear that ultimately that responsibility of accountability fell on them, not necessarily the employee. And so there was a challenge of accepting criticism and also accepting responsibility. John Maxwell always said, and I remember very clearly, he always said, great leaders take the blame for mishap.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I always thought, I'm not taking the blame for nothing I didn't do. Now, I will hold accountable as a leader and say, I will guide you. But I always was baffled by why would I take responsibility for something that somebody else did?
Yeah.
And then it was, did I train them? Did I lead them? Did I guide them? Did I speak to them? And so there was that crossover of communicating effectively and setting clear expectations on how we handle certain situations and maturity. How do you embody and lead with accountability as with a leader who struggles with responsibility and or fear of that blame being put on them? How do you balance that? If you're my coach and I'm the leader right now, let's twist it a little bit. You're my coach, executive coach, culture of good, Ryan McCarty. I get 2 calls a month, and this call is, Ryan, I struggle with taking accountability because of fear that responsibility is going to fall on my head, and I am dealing with a leader of intimidation. How would you coach me through that?
Yeah, I would ask, what is that holding you back from accomplishing?
That it's holding me back from accomplishing.
Mm-hmm.
It's holding me
or
back
realizing like what's that holding you back from?
I mean, the big picture is that it's holding back is a disconnect, right? There's a form of lack of unity, and then a perception of favoritism, and then ultimately I can't fulfill my duties and responsibilities as an employee for what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and have you communicated that with your manager?
No.
Yeah. What do you think that their dream is for you?
Sadly, that hasn't been communicated. Like there's not a conversation there. I don't know if my leader cares about my future outside of the job.
What's one way that you could this next week find a way to discover whether your leader cares or not?
Personal initiative, take initiative myself, and communicate.
What would you communicate?
My desires for growth, my desires for the accountability to that growth, without fear of losing my responsibilities as an employee on the team for the failures or lack thereof.
Can we do a quick visualization? Do you give me permission?
Let's do it.
Okay. If you would close your eyes just for a moment, I want you actually to visualize yourself walking into the room, but I don't want you to visualize walking in the room with your head down and shoulders slumped over. I want you to visualize walking in the room with your head up and your shoulders back and filled with confidence, knowing that what you're doing is standing up for yourself and how you value yourself. Where do you feel that in your body when you imagine that?
Mental. My mind.
So it's in your mind. You kind of feel it in your head.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in that thinking space.
Yeah.
What can you do in that moment before you walk into that room to remind yourself of that confident George that has that power inside of his mind?
A few deep breaths and speak over myself, speak life, speak the outcome that I want, speak the positivity and the energy that I want to exist in the room.
When do you want to have this conversation with your boss?
Now more than ever.
What day? Let's set a day.
Next week.
Next week, what day?
Monday.
Monday. What accountability would you like around that?
I
see you sweating. You're wiping your forehead.
I'm getting it. I'm in the moment. I'm in the moment. You know, the accountability would be for me to email the outcome and then discuss on our next call.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's really and that's really the steps, right? Because what we have to do again is, even if we've not been given ownership of whatever we feel like we should have ownership of, we still have ownership of our decisions. We still have ownership of our attitude. We still have ownership of our performance. We still have ownership of us showing up fully ourselves, even if it's not accepted, even if it's not celebrated, even if it's not wanted and desired. Take ownership of your own self, lead yourself in a way that others recognize that. And I think that's really, even if I were to take the leader's perspective and look at the team, because so many people are coming out of the pandemic, it's remote work. Do I know if my employees are working 3 other jobs while they're saying they're working my job? Hybrid work, all of that. And so accountability is really something that's on the table. And what it really comes down to is trust. Here's what's really, really interesting about this. You do not have to feel trust in order to have leadership within your organization. Trust is not the goal. Trust is an outcome of having a culture of accountability. If there's a lack of trust in the organization, that is the biggest indicator that you do not have a culture of accountability. Because what we need relationships are not built on trust. Well, if you just trust me, no, relationships are built on accountability. George, it's not about me saying you need to trust me and I need to trust you. And if we trust each other, we're in good relationship. It's me saying, George, if I'm going to be in relationship with you, I'm choosing to be accountable to you. Right. So when we think about accountability, we're not just talking about how do I get my team members to be accountable to the organization. What we're doing is fostering this understanding that each one of us are accountable first to ourselves and the values of that we hold very close to our heart and our soul. Because if I know my values and I take ownership of that first, then regardless of what how other people treat me, whatever, I'm not saying to stay in a toxic, abusive workplace. What I'm saying is you can fully show up and live up and honor your values and own them in a way that at the end of the day, you can look back and say, you know what? I was accountable to myself first. That's really where accountability begins. And as leaders, if we're accountable to ourselves, the next thing we're going to do is be accountable to our team.
Right.
So if we're going to start building a culture of accountability, George, we have to start as leaders getting in front of our team and explaining how we're accountable to ourselves and our values and how we're accountable to them.
Right.
Everybody wants to make the team member accountable, but nobody's talking about the man. Like here's the reality. Whatever we embody, people embrace. If you don't embody it, nobody will embrace it. It's not a culture unless everyone's feeling it, believing it, and behaving in that way most of the time. So that's the culture of accountability. I'll stop talking because I feel like I want to write a book about this, man. This is like, it's so important, man, because everybody's talking trust. Trust. Wrong conversation. Wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah,
Relationships are not built on trust.
It's that clear expectation of the relationship, right? To really thrive,
Expectations.
it has to be very clear. Without those expectations, especially in the workplace, employee engagement will drop. If an employee who's not engaged, what we found out, and not to bring out Mr. Data, and statistics, but the reality is, if employees aren't engaged, the research shows they're going to be quit. Right, when they're not connected to their leader, and they don't have a sense of belonging, 3 out of 5 workers right now are out the door in the next 60 days. That's just recent data here in 2022. And that's bad news because, when we think about it, that's only 34% right now, according to recent data with Lighthouse Research, only 34% of employers report being actively engaged at work. A lack of accountability is sure to make that problem even more worse, right?
And it's crazy, man. That's engagement.
Yeah.
It's to your point.
If you want to boost engagement and performance and job satisfaction, you got to have accountability. You got to account for your ability. I like to break down words, man. And so accountability, account for it.
Give account.
What is your ability in this workplace? It doesn't mean you just choose a person to blame when things are wrong. No, how do we, not me, how do we get through this and bring the truth to the forefront to really maximize and really help us as a team get to where we want to be? I know we got oh my gosh, we got 8 minutes. Let's get into these 5 C's of accountability, if that's cool with you, Ryan, and really try to
absolutely
down, because I think it's important, and really try to share some of this information that we have with our people out there. And listen, if you guys have any questions, comments, we love it. Please throw it in the chat. If we don't answer you live here, Ryan and I will always be back in the chat. We'll come with you afterwards today and get down and dirty with those questions and get you some answers and solutions. The first C of accountability, Ryan, is common purpose.
We always talk about why. I mean, that's right at the very beginning. We have to understand, what is the purpose behind all of this? What's the reason, right? So when we think about anything in terms of accountability, let's go back to the very beginning. What are we asking people, or what are we saying that people are accountable to? Well, let's go back to the purpose of the organization. You said 34% of employees are disengaged or unengaged at work. And so what we understand is that what are they engaging with? What are they accountable to? What are we asking them to own? What is the purpose? What is the why? Giving a reason as to why we're taking ownership, why as a team this matters. Why does it matter that we as a team take this on? And I think from the very beginning, one of the things that we embed in all of our process is the biggest why isn't just why this matters overall, but why does this matter to you? As an individual, that really, really matters in terms of accepting change, in terms of accepting what their role and responsibility and the expectation that they need to live up to. Why does that expectation matter? You said it's about setting expectations.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's that responsibility that has to be set in the forefront.
And it's common.
And exactly. Yeah. It's got to be, And it's got to be clear. Not only does it have to be common, not only and it has to be
That's a second C,
for
clear.
everyone, right? Clear expectations. There we go.
Clear
The second C.
expectations, man. Who and what?
Great transition. Clear expectations. Who and what? What does success look like, right? What does it look like? When I think about some of these accountabilities and these C's for accountability, right, I really align them with self leadership. It's the who, what, and why and where, right? It's all aligning to being where we are right now, but where we also want to be and where we're going. It all really aligns to the ultimate goal in the big picture and the business standpoint.
And that's the next one, communications and alignment. But I do want to hit that clear piece because when we, again, I talk to team members many times and you have leaders of those teams that are frustrated because they're like, there's just doesn't feel like there's accountability. But then when I talk to the team members and I say, where do you feel like the direction of your team is going? Where do you feel like the direction of the organization's going? No one knows, right? So it's like, again, you cannot expect people to take ownership of something that you've not clearly defined. There's no way to own something that you can't grasp. If you don't have it in your hands, you can't own it. So very, very clear expectations, which leads into what you're talking about, the communications and alignment. Once we understand there's common purpose and clear expectations, we move into how we're communicating. How do we set this up for success? You're talking about alignment. What are we looking for, George? Like, what kind of alignment do we look for in that?
When it comes to alignment, making sure, I think it's important. I think I quoted this movie before in one of our other earlier podcasts, but alignment to me, I think of the drum line, with Nick Cannon, one beat, one sound. It would be chaotic if we're not aligned with the same values, the same mission. We're not going in the same direction. Right? We got different departments in our company and everybody's doing their own thing, but nothing is aligned and going in the same direction, right? We got all this noise.
So good, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Imagine your favorite band and each musician is playing a different song on that album. Can you imagine the clutter that it could be?
And they could all be great musicians.
Yeah. And what was once a beautiful sound has now become the most annoying cluster of distraction. There's no unity. There's no peace. The song that was like your love language, it was your peace, it was your serenity, has now become frustration because you got four other things going on and nothing is aligned. We're not communicating. We're not playing the same key.
It's almost that harmony and that rhythm.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, how cool is that when we think about, well, where do we start? We start as leaders and we look at our values personally. How are we accountable to that? How are we accountable to our team? Each member accountable to the values individually of the team and then the organization. We're finding alignment. We're getting a rhythm. There's like this heartbeat within the organization, and accountability begins to create a rhythm because we're looking at, how is each team accountable to each other? How is that project accountable to this other project? Where is there alignment between all of it? Because we're working together with a common purpose. And then we begin to collaborate together. We coach. We're coaching people up, right? I always say there's 3 ways to coach people in an organization. You either coach them up, over, or out, right? If you can't coach them up, try to coach them over.
Yeah.
Right. If you can't coach them over, then you coach them out. Right. Because we're making adjustments. We're saying what skills are needed for this person to actually take ownership. So, George, when you come to your boss next Tuesday and you have that, or Monday, have the conversation, you're accountable to it. Then as a coach, we begin to say, what support do you need? And as a leader, we need to be there to show up when each one of our team members is vulnerable with us and say, I need more of this from you. We need to be able to say, how can I support you more? And that leads to that last one. It's the consequences, either positive or negative. Learn, act, grow, repeat, right? Fail, get up, take responsibility. We're almost out of time, George. I want you to kind of wrap this all up and really give, really challenge us as leaders around this idea of where to begin.
Yeah, I think the beginning is what we said, and in all of this, when it comes to accountability, Ryan, we have to take ownership. So in the beginning, the foundation has to be me. Leadership, as we know, leadership begins with self-leadership, and it's the sum of how well we lead ourselves and how well we are holding ourselves accountable. So having that expectation for self, how will I hold myself accountable? How will I respond to that? Because responsible behavior is fully required at every single level of my life. And so if I am not holding myself to that standard and being vulnerable, not necessarily just to my superior, but I have to be vulnerable to those who are, that I am leading. I have to be accountable to them. And I have to be open to that constructive criticism. I always tell my team, Ryan, that it's not what you say to me, but it is how you say it. I am not, I'm not above approach. I'm not above criticism. I'm not above failure, right? And so we have to be accountable to each other. That means you hold me accountable when I'm taking a shortcut. And so it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So leaders got to take full responsibility for decisions. We got to take responsibility for the communication. And we have to get rid of I and really install we. Don't abandon your team for the sake of putting a point down and making a point. We are in this together. And it's the statement that I believe that I stand strong on, Ryan, that we win together, we never lose alone, right? And so we got to be effective in our communication.
We win together, we never lose alone.
Yeah.
That should be a value in an organization.
Yeah.
That right there, that statement is a value. That's powerful. I love it.
And so, the final thing that I think about is that we as leaders have to transfer problems into constructive feedback and really submit a plan on how we can do that together. And so that's what I would say when it comes to the accountability piece, Ryan, and that that we can't just take a chance on this accountability and culture thing. We got to make a choice about this, right? Life is a series of choices, not chances. And so we got to make a choice. We have to decide, this is something that I want to have. This is something that I don't just want to have, but let's be quite frankly, we need this. You got to have accountability. If you have a successful business that wants to thrive, you want employees to be engaged, belong, and be well in doing so, you got to create a sense of responsibility, vulnerability, and accountability in the workplace.
Keep talking it, but you better start walking it, right?
Yeah,
like we got to be talking about this, talk about shoes, accountability. yeah. Walk it out. Well, George, thank you. I mean, mic drop, right? If you are interested in getting a hold of us, message George or I anytime. If you want one-on-one coaching, training around leadership and culture, that's what we're about at Culture of Good. So we're always grateful that you show up. Man, George, this is one of the most important conversations happening right now in organizations, and we're here to help. So if you do need help around building and fostering a culture of accountability, we know what we're doing around that. And so reach out to us. So listen, we love you. We're excited. We got to be done with this. We're going to see you back next week on Champion Your Culture. Have a great Thanksgiving. We're grateful for you. We love you. Peace out.